Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everyone, I am delighted to introduce today's guest, Camilla Kring. Camilla holds a Master of Science in Engineering and a PhD in Work-Life Balance from the Technical University of Denmark. As founder of Super Navigators, she has dedicated the last 20 years to helping individuals navigate their lives and organizations create flexible work cultures that accommodate different chronotypes and family structures. She has worked across Europe, China, Latin America, and the Middle East with companies including Abbott, Medtronic, Roche, and Novo Nordisk. Camilla's insights have been featured in the New York Times, the BBC, and The Guardian. She is the author of 6 books and a TEDx speaker. Please join me in welcoming Camilla Kring. Welcome, Camilla.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited.
Well, and thank you for joining me from your home office you're in Copenhagen, am I correct?
Yes, I am. I'm in Copenhagen, Denmark.
One of my favorite cities that I visited. So tell us, Camilla, tell us about your formative years. Let's start there and how they may or may not have informed where you are today.
I started at technical physics when I did my Master of Science in Engineering. I just read a folder about technical physics when I were in high school.
Wow.
And then I just started at Technical University of Denmark. I was 18 years old and then moved in at a dormitory and at the Technical University of Denmark and did my Master of Science in Engineering. I was also very active with a lot of voluntary work at the Technical University of Denmark, also the vice president of the student organization. And I did a lot of voluntary work at the university. And then after I completed my engineering study, my master thesis was about improvisational organizations and leaderships. And then I did my PhD, and it was a PhD in work-life balance. It was a EU-funded program called Get Alive Engineer, because a lot of engineers having a lot of focus in their work, and then maybe not a good relationship between work and private life.
Well, I want to unpack all of this a little bit because that was a lot. You know, when you talk about taking an interest in technical physics in high school, that sounds very, very technical, right? Very, very heady. And then the last thing I expected was what you were talking about with your you have a master's in science and engineering, which also sounds very heady. And then we move in this whole other direction about organizations and people and this, it's almost feeling like you're working on 2 sides of the brain. I'm curious how you came to take an interest in the more organizational side of things. And, you know, how did you get drawn to that very technical area? And then what compelled you to then look in the other direction? I'm assuming, and I don't like to assume too much because you know what happens when you assume. Um, I'm curious, I'm guessing you could have continued on in a more specific technical direction, but something compelled you in the other direction.
I think when you are part of Technical University, it's also you get a way of thinking that I still have in my life, even if I'm working with life navigation and flexible work culture and giving people the tools to navigate their lives, then I'm still an engineer, because an engineer and an engineering study, it is, you have a problem here, how can you create a solution? So even if I did PhD in sociology and work-life balance, it was still at the technical university here in Denmark. And so I would say I'm an engineer in the field of work-life balance. In the high school, I was so interested in math and physics. And also when I did my engineering study, it was the brain physics and also how the brain is working. And I couldn't see myself in a job in the future where I was, for example, measuring fields around the brain in maybe a dark room at a hospital or something like that. And I love working with people.
Yeah.
And also all the work I did also at the university and with being the vice president of the student union. And
Yeah.
I wanted to go in another direction. And I've also been very active in the Danish Society of Engineers. Been a board member. When I was 25, I became a board member of the Pension
Wow.
Fund for Engineers and was sitting there for 8 years. So I've always also been very interested in the long-term thinking. I think when I was 13 years old or 14 years old, I wanted to be a priest or a fighter pilot.
Wait. I want to make sure I heard that correctly. How old were you?
I think I was 13 years old or
13.
14.
You either
Yeah.
wanted to be a priest or a fighter pilot.
Yeah, but here you also have a lot of meaning, you have a focus, you have a direction. I've been working in 17 countries. It's not that I am the pilot on the plane, but and as a priest, you also on some kind of a mission. And I found my mission very early in my life. When I did my PhD, I knew that this was something that I will be working on for the rest of my life. I have never been employed. I became an engineer when I was 24 years old and a PhD when I was 27 years old. And then I have had my company for 20 years. And I have 2 life missions that I also was writing down when I was in my mid-20s. And one life mission is to give people the tools to navigate a flexible life. And the other life mission is connected with your circadian rhythm, if you're a morning person or evening person. Because in 2003, I was reading an article that has a lot of impact in my life. Because I was reading an article about chronobiologists who found the first clock gene, P3, controlling when we are sleeping and when we are awake. And I was writing my PhD at that time, and I'm not a morning person myself. So writing this article gave me an insight into my own human biological clock, and I decided to do my PhD from midday to midnight. Because I'm an afternoon and evening person, I write best at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. I've also been writing my books in the afternoon and evening. I'm not a night person, but I have the best energy and I'm very productive in the afternoon and evening.
And there's tons of research, and it sounds like you've
Yes.
done some as well, that shows that most of us have different periods of time during the day when our strengths are different strengths are best at different times of the day. I know I read a great book by Daniel Pink called
Yes.
When, where he points to a number of these things. And
Y-
yeah, so I'm this is really resonating.
Yeah, and in 2017, it was 3 American chronobiologists who won the Nobel Prize for their insights into their biological clock. And you're born with a circadian rhythm. It's not something you choose.
Yeah.
And it's a field I have been in for the last 20 years of my life. So I combined, and I'm still participating in research conferences in work-life balance and in research conferences about circadian rhythms, circadian clocks. If you are an early bird or a night owl,
Yeah.
and 80% of the population are woken up by an alarm clock. And to be woken up by an alarm clock means that we're not living in sync with our
Right.
biological clock, and it has a negative impact
Yeah.
on our health and well-being.
And I can see what you're talking about. I can very clearly see what you're talking about, being more of a afternoon or night owl type person myself, and the desire to have that kind of flex. I can see that you were saying you have two life missions, but they really merge, right? Because
Yes.
if people are really living by their true circadian rhythms and clocks, circadian clocks, then they would need a flexible life because they can't live by the structures that are put out there by either workplaces or even the way businesses run, right? If you
Yeah.
want to go to a store and buy something at a certain time of day, oh, the store's closed now, or all kinds of structures, or how do you do business with certain agencies or whatever it is out there.
Yeah, and personally, I would die in a 9 to 5 work. I knew that to be at the same place from Monday to Friday, from 9 to 5, I would mentally die, and my creativity would die, and my productivity would die. So my mission is also to create flexible work cultures where people can be themselves, and by being themselves, it's also to be in your own rhythm. I think to find your rhythm and stick to it and combine the different rhythms in your life. For example, some people also have many different family rhythms, including myself. If you have been married and you have children and then you get a divorce and you are married again, you can have many different rhythms in your life. And if you
Mhm.
are a blended family and combine it with your work rhythm and combine it with your biological rhythm. So it's also about how we can synchronize our
Mm.
rhythms in our lives. So, how can you find your optimal work life rhythms in your life?
And part of that ties in with the circumstances of your life too, right? Is what you're talking about is if you have if you have a baby, right? Your Some of your circadian rhythms are gonna go out the window for a little while.
Yeah. Yeah. But then the baby, then you will find out because children are also born with a circadian clock. I have twins, they are 12 years old, and I have a boy and a girl, Christian and Eva. And you could see very early in their life what kind of circadian clocks they have. My daughter is a night owl, and my son is an early bird. And my son could wake up at 5 a.m. My daughter could be very active at 9 or 10 in the evening.
Mhm.
So they have different rhythms, and they also go to bed at different times.
Mhm.
So one of the things that I have been working for is also changing the starting times in schools. I started a nonprofit organization called the Bee Society. The B stands for to be or not to be, as Hamlet said here in Denmark. But the Bee Society, I started that in 2006. It's a nonprofit organization working for later starting times in schools and workplaces. We have members in 50 countries, and what I have seen since 2006 is that more schools are also experimenting with later starting times in schools because we know teenagers are night owls,
Yes.
and researchers believe it's because of the testosterone. Men are most night owl when they're 21 years old, and women when they're 19 and a half years old. But that's a life mission for me. I hope that we in the future can let our children sleep until they wake up by themselves.
Yeah, I love it. And it's not just about, like, not having to use an alarm clock or something. It's about what that does to you biologically to be able to
Yeah,
really live, in your own rhythm. There's all kinds of other benefits to that, correct?
exactly. But we have a lot of morals or society favor early rises, organization favor early rises. You have this 5 a.m. club. Um, and you should not rise early in the morning if you are a night owl, because if you are a night owl, you should actually have a calm morning, you should sleep in, and then you should be productive in the afternoon or evening or when you peak mentally. And my dream for the future is that we will have equal opportunities for both night owls and early risers in our societies, because right now there's a lot of discrimination against being a night owl.
Oh,
So how
absolutely.
can so how can we create equal opportunities in health, education, and work?
And so a big part of your work is working with companies to try to
Yes.
create the right conditions so
Yes.
that they can they can be successful, profitable, effective, while also accommodating different people's rhythms and all of that, right?
Exactly.
Can you share an example of how a company might have changed how they operate to offer more flexibility and yet still operate effectively?
Yeah, of course, of course. And so one of my first customers was here in Denmark in 2006, where I started to work with Abbott, a pharmaceutical company.
Yeah.
And when I start working for a company, for example, their work-life balance satisfaction was around 39%. With implementing life navigation, my life navigation program, which is 5 sessions for all employees in smaller groups, giving them the tools to navigate their life with time, focus, also the written if you are an early riser, late riser, and spaces for inspiration and spaces for calmness, and then you're becoming a super navigator. But to give the one dimension is to create trust and also creating the foundation for a flexible work culture. And then it is also to give people the tools to create an individual work life situation, because we are different. We have different family constellations. Some people are single, some are in a relationship, some people have children. Could be people who have had a divorce and are in a blended family. So this diversity in how can you create a unique relation between your private life and also your work. And also in our work, we have different flexibilities in when we can work and where we can work. It's also depending on your work role. So it's also about creating a flexible work culture where there is a social respect and accept of different differences in when we are working and where we are working. So for example, and still have structure and discipline. So for example, it could be that a finance department found out that half of them were early risers and half of them were late risers. And then some of them were starting at 7 o'clock in the morning, and other people were starting at 10 o'clock in the morning. And then they could actually have longer opening hours and a higher life quality. So the first step here is also that you go into an organization, or let's just say a team you're working in. So let's say you are part of a team, and then you are looking into what kind of family situations do we have and what kind of chronotypes. Chronotypes are when are people a night owl or an early bird, or are they in between? But if you are mapping those chronotypes and family constellations in your team, then you can find out when it's best for us to plan meetings and when should we work individually. I've been working with teams where they are active 22 hours out of 24 hours. They are only offline between 2 and 4 o'clock in the night, because some
Wow.
people are working at 4 o'clock in the morning if they are very early, and other people are working at 1 o'clock in the night if they are a late chronotype.
Mhm.
But if you don't have trust in culture, people never dare to share what their personal ways of navigating their lives is. So the first step here is to create trust. And I think the best model for trust is from Francis Frey and Anna
Mhm.
Morris's book Unleashed, where they talk about the trust triangle,
Yep.
where the 3 dimensions: authenticity, empathy, and logic in the leadership decision. But authenticity So starting and working with organizations, you need to have the buy-in from the CEO, the HR, where you are creating the foundation for creating trust and an accept of differences. And then you have to give people the tools and awareness about how they can create a new work and life design.
So I'm curious about this. I totally, uh, I'm a fan. Um, but I'm curious now. This is, this is very focused on, we've got all these individual differences, people with different rhythms. And of course, there's a lot of commonality. There's probably groupings of people who have very
Yes.
common chronotypes. How would an organization I think you also mentioned this already, that part of it is somewhat dependent on the types of work, the types of roles that people have. I would imagine that in planning, putting together teams or hiring, that there's also there's an interdependency between understanding what people's chronotypes are and then how you would, orchestrate different ways of building teams or groups, because individual differences are all great, but then how do you build that into the larger whole? And while
And
yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
And it should of course be into a collective. It's
Yeah.
it's very, very important. And this is not about egoism or, you know, individualism. It's about how can we create workplaces supporting more people and also the differences in our family constellations, in
Mhm.
our circadian clocks, because if you can be more in sync with your circadian clock, it can unlock a lot of productivity and
Yeah.
also improve your health and well-being.
Right.
So it could be small differences. I think
Right.
what we have to see here is that, for example, if you can start at 9:30, also if you have to be in an office, you can have infrastructure problem where it takes a lot of time to go to the office before 9:30.
Yep.
But if you can go into a workplace at 9:30 without feeling guilt, or people is telling you, "Well, are you joining us today?" Or "I didn't know that you are working part-times," those sarcastic comments can also influence how much you actually will use the flexibility in an organization. Um, so it is about creating new structures. And one of the tasks people also do with life navigation is do a time registration of their week's 168 hours. And
Ah.
after sleep, first priority is work. If you have children, that will often be a second place. Third place is time with a partner, if you have a
Mm.
partner. And fourth place is individual time. It's
Mm.
often only at the car, in the car or at the toilet.
Mm.
So what people also become more aware about at the life navigation is also, what do I want to get out of my private life? So in the last 20 years, I have met a lot of people, high performance, who
Yeah.
have very clear focus in their work and they know their work goals, but they don't know what they want to get out of their private life.
Mm.
And when people are becoming more aware about what do I want to get out of my private life? What about personal time? Maybe also even time with a partner you haven't had, because, yeah, when you look into the 168, you don't have time with your partner.
Right.
So the life navigation is also about using tools to navigate your personal life.
Mhm.
And when people also feel they look at the 168, they actually feel that they have time in their life. So
Mm.
how do you spend your 168 hours? We know from research that autonomy over our time, if we feel that we have autonomy over time, it increases our life quality and well-being.
Mhm.
So that's the first step. And then you
Yeah.
have to become a pilot in your life. How can you go from being an autopilot where you're just reacting to actually be a pilot also in your personal life?
Mhm.
And again, there's no rocket science in what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
It's about setting up some goals in your personal life, The method is to put yourself in the future and then map the concrete steps to get there. And then concrete steps to get there should be implemented in your future 168 hours. And then session 3 is about becoming a conductor in your life. How can you find your rhythm? Because a lot of people don't know what rhythm they are born with.
Right.
They have closed down that ground rhythm.
Yeah.
And they have disconnected to the rhythm of their body. And how can you reconnect with your natural biological rhythm and reconnect with your ground rhythm again, also without feeling guilty? Because people can also have parents who have also told them that to be successful, you have to get up at 5 a.m., even if you're not an early riser.
Yeah.
And it's killing your rhythm, it's killing your well-being, your health, and also your productivity, because you can feel that you have jet lag the whole day and
Yeah.
you're not productive if you're not being in sync with the rhythm you're born with.
Right. Right.
So what I experienced session 3 is with the conductor and finding your rhythm and improve your well-being and productivity, is that a lot of people are actually starting to have this self-compassion, accepting themselves. Some people, even in the weekend, they can't sleep in until 8 o'clock in the morning because they feel that they have to get up and get something out of the day. So how can you accept that your natural rhythm, and you can just look into the 5th day in your holiday. When will you go to bed and when will you get up? If you don't have any children or things to wake you up, what is your natural rhythm? And if you don't know, you can take a test. You can test your chronotype. It's 19 questions, and then you can get an insight into your biological clock. You can also take a genetic test. There's bodyclock.health, where you take out some hair roots and then send them to a laboratory in Berlin in Germany. And then they can calculate your chronotype because it's genetic. You're born with a circadian clock. So if you don't know what rhythm you have, you can also get an insight into your genes. But to be in sync with your biological clock, to accept your own biological rhythm, is something where I think we can reconnect with nature. And if you just should take one thing with you from this podcast, it could be to remember to get outside when you wake up. So just before midday, get outside and get 20 minutes daylight. Because it is the daylight there is synchronizing us to the Earth's rotation around its own axis. But researchers believe it's a part of human evolution that we have a diversity of our circadian clocks, because when we were living outside, it was important that some people were biological wired to get up early and go to bed early, and other people were biological wired to go to bed late and get up late. So we were not killed by dangerous animals, but that we actually could be awake around the clock. So this biological diversity, if we could reconnect with our nature again, it could be a way to improve our health, our well-being, and also a way to unleash a lot of productivity in organizations, especially knowledge workers. We have 1 billion knowledge workers globally, shift working. 20% of the workforce are shift workers. How can we combine and match working hours with our biological clock? It can reduce health problems and stress if we let night owls working more, afternoon or evening, some people even in the night. And early risers should not work in the night.
Oh, this is fantastic. The other thing that's been running through my mind as I'm hearing everything you're saying and thinking this makes so much sense is if people can reach that point to be that conductor, of
Yeah.
of their own rhythm, to have that it's self-compassion and acceptance, but it's also, being able to guide yourself through your life to be your best self, right?
Yeah.
Think
Yeah.
about all the people out there who are night owls and have been told
Yeah.
there's something wrong with them because they're not morning people or they can't function as well in the morning. The whole, the psychology of feeling
Yeah.
like you're, you're an outsider in some ways because you stay up too late, as they say.
Yeah.
And and so I think the the self-esteem piece of this could really be part of that health picture, right?
Yeah.
There's so
And
much. I
yeah.
mean, there's so much here. Uh, what a better world we would have if people even understood their rhythms, even if they couldn't stick to it. I mean, nobody can stick
Yeah.
to anything 100%, right? But
Yes.
because there's all kinds of other factors, as you were saying, like, if you don't have children, if you don't have like, I'm thinking about all the people who have dogs, right?
Yeah.
Their dog wakes them up at 5 in the morning to go out, right? You know,
Yeah.
and yet they get great pleasure out of having a dog. So, but again, that's where you talk about balance, right? And the different things that you bring into your life that also create joy and fulfillment in your private life. I love the way you also distinguish between the personal private life goals and the professional goals. I've often talked a lot about how people separate, their professional and personal lives so much that they think they have to be so separate. But I can see the way you've described it is there really does need to be some personal private goals that are distinct in that way. They don't have to be in opposition necessarily
No.
to your professional goals. They might be very aligned values wise with what your professional goals are, right? So
Yeah.
but to have that awareness and then to be able to do something about it is it could be it's groundbreaking in my opinion. I want to make sure we talk about your book and your books. I 6 books. When when did you start writing books? When you were 5 years old? I mean, I
Yeah.
let's talk about that.
Yeah. I have 4 books in Danish and then 2 books in English. And one of my English book is called Life Navigation. And it's of course tools to navigate your life with the timekeeper, the pilot, the conductor, and also the space creator. Space creator is about choosing the right environment for the right activity. So when do you find spaces for calmness, spaces for inspiration, spaces for deep work? I call it frog off, where you have time where you're focusing. The Brian Tracy's book is about eat the frogs, but if you frog off, it's time where you actually can link it to your personal rhythm. So if you are an early riser, you should have frog off time early in the morning. If you are a late riser, you should have your frog off time later in the day, in the afternoon and evening. Um, so my life navigation book, and it's actually I have an ebook also for free.
Oh,
So you can just download it and you don't have to sign up for everything or anything. It's just yeah, so it's 100 pages with the life navigation concept and tools to navigate your life. And then my book number 6 is Chrono Leadership: How to Create Healthier and More Productive Rhythms in Your Work and Life. It just came out in US here in July, and it is a book where I talk about how we can create chrono inclusive workplaces for diversity in our chronotypes because it's genetic. And also, when talking about knowledge workers, how can you actually work more in sync with your biological clock because it will improve your health, your well being, and also your productivity if you can work when you peak mentally. I often ask people if they are dromedary, it's people who peak 1 time a day, or if they are camels, then they peak twice. But
ah.
if you know your peak time, during the day. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, we're going to include links to all of these things you've been talking about, including like bodyclock.health. All of these things we want to include in the show notes. So I will make sure that all the things you've mentioned, that we have that in the show notes for people, because I know they're going to be looking for these resources. This is tremendous, tremendous, Camilla. Is there is and I have to say I'm still thinking about who was that 13-year-old who wanted to be a priest or a fighter pilot. I'm like that I'm still really intrigued by that, but I can see, so many things that you've done and looked at, and the way that they've integrated, and how that thread just carries through to everything that you've done. It's amazing. I could talk to you forever.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm just so intrigued by this. So if people want to zero in, and what would be one best way for somebody to follow your work or connect with you? And we'll have, of course, all the other links in the show notes, but what would be the first place you'd want them to go?
I just started a LinkedIn newsletter when my company celebrated 20 years birthday. And it's a life navigation LinkedIn newsletter. So I think on LinkedIn, I only send something out every month, but it is life navigation and helping you to navigate your life. So I think if you are interested also in hearing more and learning more about life navigation and chrono leadership, it could be the LinkedIn newsletter.
Okay. And they can also look at your profile, or perhaps connect with
Yeah.
you, or at least follow you on
Yeah, that would
LinkedIn,
be
right?
great. Please connect also.
Okay.
Yes, and then I of course have supernavigators.com, and I have a whole website about circadian rhythms, an information website called Applied Chronobiology. So I have a lot of information where you can go in, and also, yeah, I have recommended a lot of books about circadian clocks.
Wow.
It's a
Okay.
knowledge website. I love to share knowledge.
I can tell. I was gonna say, with all of these things that you've done in these 20 plus years, I'm thinking, do you ever get any sleep?
I sleep in my own rhythm. I try to sleep in. Of course, when I have my children, I have to get a little bit up earlier.
Yeah.
But my rhythm here in my life right now, because it's also changing when you're young. For example, when I did my PhD, my rhythm would be to sleep between 1 o'clock in the night to 9 o'clock in the morning or something like
Yeah.
that. Right now, I'm 47 years old,
Yeah.
and I am what you will call an intermediate chronotype and a little bit late chronotype, but my sleep window is around midnight to 8 o'clock in the morning,
Mhm.
or a little bit after midnight and to 8:30 or something like that in the morning. So if I can sleep into that window, I actually get a high level of energy the whole day.
Mhm. Oh, this is great. This is great. So now I know when to call you and when not to call you. So one final question, and I feel like you've answered it in so many different ways, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So we have a lot of people listening to this who are thinking about what's next for them. They're considering making some kind of a change or a move professionally or otherwise. What would be a key piece of advice that you might give somebody who's considering their next move?
I think this also how we have talked about finding your rhythm.
Right.
Rhythm is the key word that I have. That's really the word. I think if you can find your rhythm, you also connect with your inner purpose,
Yeah.
because you reconnect with your body. So if you are in a career transition
Yeah.
and you actually listening to your rhythm, you can also go deep and connect with your subconscious level.
Yeah. Great. I agree completely, but I love hearing it come from you. Camila, thank you so, so much. I want to encourage everybody to look for your books, look for your ebook, and all the other work you've been doing. I think this is enormously valuable, not just for the individuals, but for society. And I know I'm going to be looking further and further into all of this as well. Thank you so much for being here. It's been a joy and a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for sticking around to the end of my interview with Camilla Kring. What is your key takeaway from our conversation? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygulerloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 280. And while you're there, you can also subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes. Did you know that ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts can help this podcast reach more people? Please help me to inspire more people to move their careers in meaningful directions by clicking on the Apple Podcasts button and leave an honest rating and brief review. It'll be so helpful to the podcast and those who are gaining from it. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my award-winning book, Work from the Inside Out: Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career that Fulfills You. It's available through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, or through your local library. You can also help sustain this podcast by buying me a cup of coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TammyGL. Since this podcast is self-funded, your support is acknowledged and appreciated. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.